Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here this afternoon. And it's also great to be working in my home city here as Manchester's Active Travel Commissioner, together with my other half, who is the Transport Commissioner, Vernon Everett. We advise Mayor Andy Burnham and the other leaders of Greater Manchester on the region's transport objectives and delivery that will benefit the region's 3 million residents. It's also a transport system we need to work for those people who are working here in the region and those visiting us too. It's a vast remit, and as you will have already heard throughout the day, there is a great deal going on to make this ambition a reality. So as you already probably know, the B Network began as a regional walking, wheeling and cycling network, and this was launched under the region's previous commissioner and my fellow cyclist, Chris Boardman, back in 2018. The ambition was met with huge positivity and the appetite for improving all transport was clear. At this point, I was watching on from my role in South Yorkshire, where I did a similar job for their first mayor, Dan Jarvis. With such momentum here in Greater Manchester, it was great to see that within a few years, the B Network became an even bigger vision for a single, integrated, affordable and accessible network with a seamless tap-in and tap-out system for all journeys across bus, tram, commuter rail and bike hire, still very much a guiding principle of what is being done here. And crucially, the initial vision of a walking, wheeling and cycling network remains at the heart, providing the glue that links it all together. It is also a key enabler for Greater Manchester's wider priorities of health and well-being, the net zero and growth agendas, amongst others. And it will only be possible to deliver on those priority outcomes if we can successfully enable millions of people on a daily basis to make different travel choices and choose to leave their car at home. Here in Greater Manchester, the goal is for 50% of all journeys to be made by public transport or active travel by 2040. And underpinning that ambition are some interesting stats as shown on this slide. This shows that the opportunity is clear to see. More than half of the trips in Greater Manchester made by GM residents are under 2 kilometres. And while the majority of those are walked, 38% are still taken by car. When it comes to slightly longer journeys, those of 2 to 5 kilometres or around 3 miles, you can see just how dominant driving is, with around 80% of those journeys still taken in a vehicle. Yet these trips are short enough to be walked or cycled by most people if infrastructure was better, more available and routes were more accessible, or even an easy bus ride. In the last 5 years, we have seen the proportion of people choosing to walk for short journeys rise from 52% to 57%, while the proportion of journeys taken by car is down from 41% to 36%. But when we zoom out, we can see that car journeys are not decreasing, and private car ownership has been increasing. Between 2011 and 2021, the number of private cars in Greater Manchester grew by 13%, and that's way ahead of population growth, which currently stands at 7%. As a result, we really need to press on with the solutions, and as you'll see from the Active Travel mission, it has a huge role to play. So this is the mission, within which I've set the key priorities shown here, and it was adopted by the leaders of the region. There are 5 key priorities, underpinned by the 6th principle of universal accessibility. All of these elements must be pulling together, so let's take a look at each one in more detail. We need safer infrastructure to enable the long-term goal, which is by 2040, 95% of the population in Greater Manchester will be living within 400 metres of a B Network standard walking, wheeling or cycling route. And at the last count, GM had built around 120 kilometres of the 2,700 that are needed. It's forecast to grow by 176 kilometres by 2027. Cycling levels in Greater Manchester are up, but only in line with all journeys. So we've not yet managed to increase the share of trips being done by bike, and appreciation levels have fallen, largely largely due to increasing expectations of the network. Given all of this, there needs to be an increase in the pace of delivery, particularly in creating connected and protected strategic routes. So in January, councillors from across the 10 local authorities approved my proposal to create a strategic cycle network that will link our regional centres with neighbourhoods, just like in London. This builds on the initial plan from 2018, where investment was concentrated on the main centres, which included the major public transport hubs. The gaps now show clearly the opportunity to link up what has already been created, and in some cases with relatively simple schemes to resolve critical missing links. So how does this look in action? Let's go over to Rochdale. Work is about to start on linking up a small section of cycle track in the village of Castleton, with a much longer section which will link it all the way to Rochdale Town Centre in one direction and give more people a protected route all the way to the railway station at Castleton, where there's a direct service into Manchester city centre. This is an example of how starting to build the strategic cycle network can be done, and crucially, it can also be done alongside the planning of other public transport services and other infrastructure, such as the expansion of cycle hire. When it comes to walking, January also saw councillors approve recommendations to invest more in walking, as the 2024 annual report showed that this had been neglected, despite it being the most common way for people to make their short journeys. In addition, key population centres across Greater Manchester are busy making their centres more walkable as a key part of their urban regeneration plans, which includes increasing town and city centre living and the rise in demand for more pleasant walking environments. Oldham is one example where they're making some impressive headway in the revamp of their town centre. Connectivity into the B network interchange there has been upgraded, making it easier to walk, wheel or cycle to and between bus and tram journeys, as well as linking from there into a remodelled public space with ambitions for more public realm and much improved shopping and leisure experience, and the opportunity for more residential investment too. Pedestrianised areas like Oldham Town Centre are backed by research such as Living Street's Pedestrian Pound report, which shows higher levels of pedestrianisation increases footfall, which in turn increases local spending too. Connected to this is the importance of crossing points for pedestrians. And when I began in 2022, I commissioned an audit of our entire network, the results of which show just how hostile a lot of roads are across the region for pedestrians. Around 200 junctions have no pedestrian phase at all, and 2,000 points of severance were identified, and at those points it's almost impossible to cross the road ever. Whilst it's a huge task, it must be addressed as part of this wider work over the coming years. School travel is a really huge part of the mission, and school travel is estimated to create around 1 in 4 journeys at either end of the school day, so making it safe, cost-effective and convenient for families to choose to travel on foot, bike or public transport helps cut traffic and improves the health and well-being of our children. The latest data shows around a quarter of children leaving primary school are classified as obese, and inactivity is now associated with 1 in 6 deaths in the UK. It's a bigger killer than smoking. Any teacher will tell you that walking or cycling to school also improves their pupils' readiness to learn, as children are more relaxed and alert when they've had some physical activity before school. There are also some frightening stats around childhood asthma, so improving air quality, particularly in high-density population areas, is an important part of the work on school travel. This year, we've prioritised the development of a school travel programme that, amongst the ongoing delivery of specific crossings and other infrastructure, is going to include the delivery of 100 permanent school streets by 2028. And as the pictures on the right show, the difference at the school gate with the traffic before and after a school street is installed makes the road almost unrecognisable. Work is also going on to ensure school travel is linked into the wider B network, which will facilitate the journeys of high school and college students. It's a wide-reaching programme that demonstrates just why active travel is the glue that binds it all together, and why the next priority of integrating with public transport is so important. Too many people don't have a genuine choice with their journey choices, and many are struggling to afford to run a car, so it's vital everything is integrated to provide that genuine alternative. People need to feel confident in an easy and safe journey on foot or bike to that public transport journey, which is one of the ways we can increase bus, tram and train patronage. In Greater Manchester, we have ambitious goals to increase bus patronage to 30% by 2030 and to unlock an additional 1.3 million journeys from our commuter rail plan. This means the walking and cycling links of those journeys must be suitable, and as such we create a virtuous circle. If we get it right and there's more people on foot or bike, we get more passengers. It's not just about walking to the bus or cycling to the station. Last year, Greater Manchester conducted a pilot for the carriage of cycles on trams, and the recommendations of that successful trial are being worked through at the moment. It makes sense to ensure there are fewer barriers to people making journeys without their car, and to support those journeys of people who are using a non-standard cycle too. This is where we need public transport operators and developers across the UK to really help with this mission, planning in safe, well-lit walking routes, safe and secure cycle storage, getting rid of steps and inaccessible barriers, and thinking about the links that people are taking to their places. It really is smart business planning. But of course, all of the above relies on people feeling safe enough to try out a mode that isn't their own car, which is why road danger reduction is so important. Since I joined as Commissioner, it's been clear that even if we deliver all of the above successfully, we still need to reduce danger on our roads to achieve our goals. Road deaths and serious life-changing injuries are falling, yet the roads feel more dangerous and off-putting to other users. 70% of people say safety is their biggest barrier to walking and cycling, and it's the reason I became involved in active travel in the first place, having been knocked off my bike not too far from here by a driver on a roundabout in 2006. The impacts of road crashes are immeasurable to those involved, and a huge drain on public services, with costs estimated to be at least 472 million in 1 year for Greater Manchester alone. Greater Manchester Police are now also seizing more than 10,000 illegal vehicles a year, with many of those vehicles linked to wider crime. And shockingly, Greater Manchester fire officers are now attending more road traffic collisions than they do fires. To tackle the issues of dangerous drivers and poor behaviour on our roads, last year the region adopted Vision Zero, which means we're looking to reduce deaths and serious injuries on our roads to zero by 2040, with an interim target of halving them by 2030. Our plan includes measures to increase hotspot policing, improve ways to report dangerous driving, reviewing speed limits and speeding policies, and ensure all those involved in collisions receive the best possible care, as well as ensuring the causes of collisions are properly assessed to reduce the chance of the same thing happening again. I'm also keen that we help in the creation of a national road safety strategy, which is long overdue and will play a pivotal role in regions like ours being able to deliver for our residents. Our goal is to make sure people can get on and grow old here in Greater Manchester, and having safe streets for people to live, work and play in is absolutely vital to that. The final pillar of the mission is access to active travel, which is making sure everyone who lives, works or visits Greater Manchester has access to a form of active travel, linking in with partners to enable people to try new ways of moving around. One of my favourite parts of this priority are the groups such as Simply Cycling or Wheels for All, who are providing access to non-standard cycles for people with mobility challenges and disabilities. These centres are dotted across the region and provide wraparound support in accessing a suitable cycle, helping people gain confidence in personal fitness, route finding and day-to-day use, as well as being a fantastic support network for people who thought they'd never ride. Shared use hire schemes like the Starling Bank Bike Hire Scheme are vital for residents and visitors alike, with many of the 4,000 monthly active users being people with nowhere to store their own bike or visitors to the city wanting a convenient way of covering a longer distance. Currently, the scheme reports 1.5 rides per day per bike on average, and there's been more than 1 million rides since the scheme was launched in 2021. Beryl's recent survey reported that 44% of riders said they had returned to cycling after a break thanks to the scheme, and 34% of riders were using their cars less often as a result of having the scheme local to them. The scheme currently only operates in parts of Manchester, Salford and Trafford with around 1,200 bikes, but a further 300 e-assist pedal bikes are due to be delivered soon, and this will make half the fleet electric. There's a huge appetite to expand the scheme too, which is currently being worked on. Another way to access cycles is via the 30 bike libraries based in community organisations across the region. And this is where people can go and try a bike before they go on to buy one of their own. There's also a borrow an e-bike scheme where people can book an electric bike for a free 1-month loan. Overarching all of this is the principle of universal accessibility. And under the B Network brand, one of the 6 customer commitments is everyone can use us. This runs across all modes, whether that's bus, tram, walking, wheeling or cycling, and is delivered through a set of quality standards enshrined in Greater Manchester's Streets for All design guide, which lays out the principles of how we design our streets and in line with national guidance. This design guide delivers everything from key bus corridors through to neighbourhood schemes and of course interchange hubs, with details such as cycle routes have to be rideable with a non-standard cycle, or walking facilities must accommodate a parent pushing a double buggy. And transport stops and hubs must be fully accessible for wheelchair users and ambulant passengers alike. Plans to bring commuter rail lines into the B network are very important here too. Of the 64 stations along the rail routes in Greater Manchester, less than half have step-free access. A recent campaign has secured funding to start the upgrades needed. 7 are underway, and at least a further 5 have been added to that, with the rest being worked on for future funding pots. So that's the tour. A whistle-stop tour of an absolutely vast programme. There's a lot to take on, but by breaking it down into these manageable chunks that all link together and contribute to the overall goal, the workload is spread out and we can work through the checklist and keep on making progress. There's still a great deal of work to be done, and you may have questions about one particular part. So I'll pause now and see what you've got to say. Thank you very much.
That was a very comprehensive look at what's happening with active travel across the Greater Manchester area. And what I wanted to do now is go straight to the audience to get some questions. So we're just getting the mics. So please do put up your hands if you have any questions. I'm sure you're happy to answer those. Yeah. Any questions at all, anybody? Yes. Lady at the front here. Lady at the front here. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I just say how excited I am that you're here and I've seen you in the flesh. I work in transport, and often the problem when designing multimodal transport is that nobody makes a margin out of active travel, and therefore it's quite difficult to design incentives. How are you tackling that in Manchester?
Well, looking at the journey from end to end, it's not just about one portion. The whole journey has that value. So active travel is part of a longer journey using public transport, or it's instead of utilising a car. Everyone who uses a car has an impact on, road maintenance costs. So I think it's about looking at it in the round and zooming out a lot more. And I think, we talk about this a lot at the department, making sure I work on the role on the Department of Transport Board, making sure that we really value the true value of active travel, not just look at it in the old ways of making those calculations. Shall I sit one step away? Because I think we're into...
There we go, we are. That's
buzzing, I think. I don't know what the technical term is.
We'll stick with into buzzing, because that's a good one.
Into buzzing.
We're into buzzing. Thank you. Any other questions at all, please? Yes, gentleman here.
Hi there. I think You mentioned that the amount of active travel routes you've built is something like 150 kilometres, but you need to build another 2,000 kilometres. Is there a realistic plan to deliver that?
Well, that's it. Not all of it's funded. It's an aspiration currently, and it absolutely has to be linked into all of the other parts of the network. So building into the public transport journeys that are being built out, the changes to funding models is also really important to make sure that we can plan to build these things at pace. Devolution plays a huge role in that, making sure that local authorities, local areas, mayoral combined authorities can make the decisions for themselves on the ground where that money needs to be spent and at what point. But no, absolutely, it's a huge task, and we're not shying away from that. We know that it's a big target, but anything in life could be seen as a big target, and we're breaking it down into those small, manageable chunks to make sure it doesn't seem too overwhelming.
Thank you. Any other questions at all? Yes, gentleman here.
Just interested in around barriers, really, and putting to one side the barrier funding, but barriers really in terms of behaviours around more walking and more cycling. What's your experience in those areas?
Well, our annual report last year showed that there's a huge decrease in satisfaction of our pavements, and people are struggling to get around because it's not easy. And I experienced this myself when I broke my ankle in December and I was using a knee bike. I was misquoted in the press as using an e-bike, and I thought, well, that's a bit illegal on a pavement. So I was walking with a knee bike, and it was just so bumpy and difficult to get around. So we really need to make sure that we focus on that high quality infrastructure to remove those barriers, because otherwise people are going to choose what they perceive to be the most convenient thing for them, which is if they're walking past their car, they're just going to jump in that and travel to work or travel to where they're going to go. So it's about that high quality infrastructure.
Thank you, Dame Sarah. Any other questions at all? Yes, gentleman right here. Thank you.
Stephen Chato. I lead the campaign for the Peak Line. It's about active travel in a rural setting, and for the national park, in excess of 90% of visitors arrive by car. It may be unrealistic to hit your target of 50% public transport or active travel by 2040, but how much of your method might be transferable to a rural setting?
It's a very good question, and I'm on the receiving end when I ride my bike through the national park of those many millions arriving by car, and the parking that as a result of the parking that we suffer. I think that the principles are probably the same. It's about working in partnership to make sure that we can provide that easy, cost-effective way of accessing the national park, looking at the role of buses to, through and from the public transport interchanges. But we also have to have a little bit of stick as well as carrot, and it's easy to park for free in a lot of places, and maybe we need to find ways to make sure that some of the stick is provided to fund the parts that are otherwise not possible to provide.
Thank you. We've got time just for one last question. Lady over here, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Government have really ambitious targets around housing delivery. I was just wondering, what are your views on how we make sure that in the drive to deliver lots of new homes, we don't end up with them being all car dependent?
Well, Active Travel England are a statutory consultee on planning to make sure that they build in from the start, and it's really important that we continue to involve Active Travel England and all of the work that's going on in that. We can't embed car culture into new housing developments. So I think it's something that we're very aware of that needs to continue to be pressed and not forgotten. And I guess that's one of the parts of the role that you have to do. You have to keep banging the drum for walking and cycling, because people do forget that walking is a mode of transport. And we even forget it ourselves. But taking those steps to ensure that it is right at the top of the list, it's the most important thing, that people can walk from their front door to a public transport journey or to continue with an active travel journey, is so important.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh my gosh. Okay, one last one. One last question. Thank you.
How much do you think climate and topography affects use of walking and cycling, particularly in Manchester? I live in Stretford myself, and I'm a kind of fair weather cyclist, I have to admit. But is that an issue, and have you got any data around that?
Well, if you look across the North Sea, the Netherlands don't suffer anymore. They might have fewer hills, although a lot of the hills they do have are full of cobbles. But they have the same sort of weather as we do. I think once the network is protected and you're protected from those vehicles, junctions most importantly are also protected, it feels less terrifying. And as someone who competed in March in Appledorn at the velodrome, Storm Gareth was raging, but I commuted from where I was staying, about half an hour journey each way, to the velodrome and back on my bike. It was part of getting my headspace right to compete at the World Championships, but it was also because it was such a novelty to be able to ride in the rain and the dark on protected infrastructure. So it is possible to deliver, but we need to make sure that we build that connected network, because unless it goes everywhere that you need to go and it's on all routes, then somebody somewhere will have to say, oh, well, it's not safe on this little bit, so I can't do it. So we have got a long way to go before that, but there are, hopefully from Stretford, you're in a good position to get into city centre quite soon, once we finish the A56 and down Talbot Road and past Old Trafford cricket, into where the back of MMU is, and Deansgate. So hopefully you'll be able to test it out for us soon.
Fantastic.